Start.
Good evening. I'm Kent Bolke. I'm the museum director at the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum Museum. We tell two unique stories there. We tell the story of Fort Drum and then the 10th Mountain Division. Two stories that come together in 1985. And as advertised, we start the story about 13,500 years ago. As you can see on the screen there are the two artifacts, two artifacts. I'm not an archaeologist, so don't ask me archaeological questions. That's Dr. Lori Rush. She's a world-renowned archaeologist that works on Fort Drum Cultural Resources. She really is the world's expert on what had gone on in Fort Drum. But you see number one there, that is a Clovis point. It's a reproduction. It's not the real thing. The real thing is in the Smithsonian. That's how important it was that they found here in Fort Drum. But it dates back 13,500 years. Okay, the one down below is much younger, 11,000 to 13,500 years ago. And the one down below is actually is a charismatic knife. The one more on top is more of a spear point. One down below is a handheld knife, essentially. So when you think about technology, it's obviously changed. And that's going to be a running theme as we go through here. Technology's changed, but a lot of the stuff has kind of stayed the same, believe it or not. They use the Tizo and pedal there. You see on the bottom left to grind corn. They use millstones. Obviously, you see them all over the North Country. Steel mill cuts. Technology changes, but kind of those ideas stay the same. And you're going to see that throughout this presentation as technology takes a step forward and we start to increase. But the Native American population had been living on this piece of property since the last ice age. And up till 1940, when they were evicted along with the other settlers that were evicted as part of the expansion of Fort Drum, they had been living here that long. And that you can find remains still in the ground on Fort Drum proper. Everything you see in that display case there was found inside the fence of Fort Drum. So we're going to take a giant leap forward in history to the War of 1812. So prior to the War of 1812, there was no military presence in the North Country per se. Yes, there was military in the region. There was really their main reason for them being here was chasing smugglers across the river and things like that, but not really a military presence like you'd think of today. The War of 1812 brought the military to the North Country, in particular to Sackett's Harbor. The Navy freshwater headquarters for operations during the War of 1812 was at Sackett's Harbor. Okay, they were building ships of the line at Sackett's Harbor. Now, Navy, great on the water, terrible on the land. So the Army came to protect Sackett's Harbor from a land attack and an attack from the water, essentially. And who has been to Sackett's Harbor and familiar with the story to a degree? If you haven't been, I highly recommend you go. If you can make it during the 1812 weekend, where there's a reenactment, and you can actually put hands on history, smell the smells, eat some of the food if you're real lucky, have some hardtack and stuff like that. But I highly recommend you go walk the battlefield and learn what went on. It's an important piece of history that happened in our own backyard. But during the war, twice the harbor was attacked. First in 1812 and then again in 1813. The main battle occurs in 1813. The British come down, they sail down the river, they try to land on Horse Island initially and then get pushed around to the south side. They land, they come across the causeway, they meet the Army militia, the New York State militia, then they fight their way into the Army, they fight their way through the town. It's a bloody mess. I'm not going to get too much into the battle because we don't have time, and I'm not really the expert on the battle per se, but visit Sackett's Harbor. There's a wonderful walking trail you can take, and the people there really are the experts on what happened. But eventually, the goal of the British was to seize or destroy what was happening at the harbor. seize or destroy. The British fight their way all the way to the gates of the harbor when they decide enough. And they begin their long retreat back to Canada. Young Navy ensign sees them at the gates and says, "The day is lost, set fire to everything." What was the goal? Seize or destroy. At the end of the day, the United States Army wins the battle, the United States Navy loses it. I was in the Coast Guard, so I like picking on the name. Okay, but nonetheless, they meet their overall objective of destroying the harbor and the supplies that are being held there and prevent a waterborne attack on Canada, which was their main goal. Again, I am not the expert on the Battle of Sackett's Harbor and really not in the War of 1812, but I do have a thesis that suggests that the failure at Chrysler Farm wouldn't have happened if we had attacked from water, which would have happened if we had not lost Sackett's Harbor. So, and it's a footnote in history, but may have been a much more important battle if we hadn't lost the Battle of Sackett's Harbor. So, after the War of 1812, the Army moves into Madison Barracks. Madison Barracks is considered to be one of the finest forts in the United States Army at the time. It is a wonderful location. Anybody been to Madison Barracks? Mm-hmm. All those wonderful red brick buildings were built during this time frame, at post-War of 1812, and were kept all the way through World War II. It's just a wonderful place to live, operate. And the main reason was because there was two fields, a parade ground and a polo field. Okay, that's where they go out and they play the 1812 lacrosse tournaments and all those wonderful things that, you know, the events that happen out there is on those fields. Why do you think they had two fields? Well, the reason for the parade field was every afternoon you threw a parade for the post commandant. The reason you threw a parade was at this time frame, you marched into battle, not to the battle, in the battle. You walked shoulder to shoulder, leveled your weapon, and fired at the enemy. You were expected to march in combat, through combat, and engage the enemy. It's not like today where you hide behind a tree, take a shot, maneuver to the enemy. You literally stood as close as you're sitting right now, using smoothbore weapons, and that was the key, smoothbore weapons. You can hunt with a smoothbore weapon, but you're probably going to be kind of hungry. Smoothbore weapons are effective maybe 100 yards, maybe, if you're shooting at the broadside of a barn. There's no sights on the smoothbore weapon. You just kind of point it at the general direction you want to hit something. How guys put food on the table, I really don't know. But when you mass everybody together, shoulder to shoulder, literally touching shoulder to shoulder, and you mass your fire, you get a shotgun effect at the enemy, who's also standing shoulder to shoulder. So this is why you see battles like at Gettysburg, although they had a little bit of a problem in that they had rifled all their muskets and were much more accurate. But that's technology again, taking a leap forward. So that explains the one parade field. But why the other field? Well, the officers would play polo. You all familiar with the game of polo? Where you run around on a horse and you smack a ball with a mallet? Why do you think that they had their own polo field? Who wants to march in the horse hockey? Not only that, but it's a bigger field. Yeah. It's a bigger field. But why are they playing polo? Polo is a combat sport, much like the Indians playing, or the Native Americans up here in this area playing lacrosse. It's a combat sport. If you can smack that stupid ball with your mallet, you can take a guy's head off with your saber. So that's why they're out playing polo. The enlisted men are marching, the officers are playing polo, because they're going to be on horseback. So, talk a little bit about the technology of a smoothbore weapon. Smoothbore weapon is exactly that. It's a piece of pipe. The barrel is a piece of pipe with nothing inside of it, just smooth, and a wooden stock, and you have a ramrod. And the way it works is you reach into your cartridge box, pull out a cartridge. Cartridge looks a lot like a cigar. It's about the same shape and diameter. Tear it open with your teeth. At this time, the United States Army had one requirement. You had to have two teeth. They'd come together at the front of your face. They'd come together at the front of your face so you could tear open your cartridge. Take your cartridge, pour the powder down the barrel. Before that, I'm not very well trained. Before you do that, you got to pour a little bit of powder in the pan. Close the pan. Pour the rest of the powder down the barrel. Take the ball and the paper, push them into the barrel. Take your ramrod, push everything to the bottom. Stow the ramrod, level, and fire on command. I can train you to do that really in about a day. It's not that hard to master. I've done it before. Although I tended to do Civil War, which is a different way I get mixed up. But nonetheless, you can really become fairly well trained. And the other thing is too, is we can do it on the parade field. And so the only thing we have to do is give you your cartridge minus a ball. So when you see all the guys out at the reenactments shooting at each other, they're going through all the same steps other than putting the projectile down the barrel. So when they go out there and they practice to march on the battlefield, they were actually shooting the exact same way they would in combat on that parade field. But the hard part is maneuvering together and following commands in the heat of battle and understanding what the sounds of the combat are. This is why they're using music and bugle calls and drums and things of that nature is to communicate with one another. This is why the uniforms are so colorful at the time. You can tell from a distance, the guys in yellow are cavalry, the guys in blue are infantry, the guys wearing red, the red legs, those guys are artillery. And so your dress uniform was your battle uniform because that's what signified as to who you were. Not only a good guy or a bad guy, but not only that, but who you were amongst the good guys. Works wonderfully until things like this come along. In particular, rifling down the barrel. A rifle, you can rifle a musket, and then what we commonly refer to as a rifle today basically means the barrel has a groove cut into it. And I like to talk to kids, is which is bigger, a basketball court or a football field? Think about lobbing a basketball. How far are you going to go? Not that far. How far can you spiral a football? And that's exactly what happens when we start rifling barrels. All of a sudden, that conical shaped bullet spiraling down the barrel goes much farther and much more accurately. All of a sudden, the parade field is obsolete. So the Army needs to spread out, and we need some place to go to train. All of a sudden, we're shooting machine guns that fire hundreds of rounds a minute. A well-trained infantryman with a musket could fire 3 rounds in 1 minute. And we've gone from that to firing hundreds of rounds from a machine gun. A rifle, a bolt-action rifle at the time, well-aimed shot upwards of 1,000 yards, could fire 10 rounds in 1 minute. Now, hitting something at 1,000 yards is a bit much, but it was capable of doing that. The soldiers were required to go out to the range and identify targets. You actually had increased your pay if you could identify targets as to how far away they were. Today, we start to engage in about 400 yards. Think about that, 400 football fields, 4 football fields away. We're starting to shoot at you. Says a lot about the guys today. But all of a sudden, that parade field is no longer acceptable. So the Army comes to the Pine Plains region and sets up Pine Camp. Now, Pine Camp is roughly where we're at today. It is across the river from Great Bend, and they set up in 1908 as a temporary camp and say, you know what, this is an excellent place to be. So they start coming back in 1910, which is when this picture is taken. By the way, these guys are 10th Cavalry from Camp Ethan Allen, Vermont. They came here on horseback to prove that there was still a place for cavalry on the battlefield. Imagine riding a horse from Camp Ethan Allen, Vermont. Well, that's okay. The guys that came from Sackett's Harbor marched from Sackett's Harbor to Pine Camp. Roughly where the headquarters is today is, well, actually closer to where the airfield is. They marched from Sackett's Harbor to where the airfield is in a day. In a day.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Now, again, technology is going to make that obsolete here real quick, too. But we needed that place to train. We needed, all of a sudden, ammunition reaches much further. Artillery fires, instead of how far you can see it, You go to the battles of Gettysburg, the battlefield of Gettysburg, and you can see where the opposing artillery is, and they're just outside of range of one another. Now all of a sudden, I can shoot beyond the horizon. Okay, and so we needed that place to spread out and really be able to train. So they chose the Pine Plains region, and that's where we got the name Pine Camp. Then in 1935, the Army decides we're not ready for what's happening in Europe. What's happening in Europe in 1935? Hitler's in power, Mussolini's in power. The 1935 maneuvers in Germany led to the formation of 10 Panzer divisions. We, in our 1935 maneuvers, supposedly sent 30 tanks. I can find proof of 3 individual tanks. We used World War I surplus equipment, no aircraft, had to lease 100 New York City taxi cabs to maneuver on the battlefield, not to the battlefield, on the battlefield. Okay, we had to lease taxi cabs. That's how ill-prepared we were. And so the 1935 maneuvers, as you see here, the coloring, the purple section, that was Pine Camp. That was Army-owned property. But we needed much more space to spread out. There was 5 divisions that came from the 35 maneuvers and maneuvered against one another. Think about that. 5 10th Mountain divisions here all at the same time, all maneuvering against one another. They needed more space than was available at Pine Camp at the time. So the green area is where they maneuvered, and the yellow area is where they kind of hung out and bivouacked. So you imagine waking up in the morning, there's some guys running around shooting blanks at each other through your backyard. Okay, look at some of the town names, you start recognizing, wait a minute, that's, people live there. And so they paid maneuver damage, cut wires, killed chickens, scared cows, things like that. But we realized too, is like modern warfare is getting much, much bigger. It's taking up much more space. So the Army in 1940 says, we're going to buy all of this land. Now in the bottom left section there, you see that white area that's cut out, that's the original Pine Camp. The rest of that is where Fort Pine Camp is going to expand to. There's a problem. This is the 1939 tax map. Each one of those individual things that you see on the map there is somebody's farmhouse. Okay, we took over Alpena, Dueling's Crossings, Fargo, Loreysville, Lewisburg, North Wilna, Reedsville, Slocumville, Sterlingburg, Sterlingville, and Woods Mills. We're all get out. Used eminent domain. Now, depends on who you are, is if it was okay or not. Some people took the money and ran because they were living in glacial till, not very good farmland. They were happy to take the money and run. Some people, in particular in the Loreysville area, near where the Roy Mansion is, were not happy at all and fought it. And to this day, families still not real happy. Other families were, like I said, more than happy to support the war effort. They were proud that they were doing something to support the war effort. The thing is, this is 1940. Okay? Somebody had enough foresight to say, we're getting sucked into World War II, even though America is an isolationist nation at the time. So somebody had enough foresight to do this. But here's the secret. Here's something people don't realize. It didn't just happen here. You go to any post in the United States Army today, there's a similar story. We're the only ones to truly embrace the story and really tell the story. Now, if you're interested in this, okay, this is neat. Go to that website, fortrumicesportsman.net, and it'll bring up this page. You go up to the bottom, underneath where it says AU, click on the 3 little bars, it'll bring you up this page. Go to the bottom left where it says cemetery visits. I'm not going to go into it. Click on cemetery visits. It brings up more information than you can imagine. Covers all the villages. There's a list of who's buried in each cemetery, how to visit the cemeteries, where they're located, You can go visit right now today if you want, as long as you go through iSportsman and click in and register that you're visiting. We just don't want you out there while they're training shooting at one another. We don't want you to get hit by a truck. We don't want you to get hit by a bullet. There's a couple places where you just don't want to go because we're dropping bombs and things like that. But nonetheless, you can go visit all of the old villages and cemeteries in particular, as long as you check in through the iSportsman. And so that website again is FortDrumISportsman.net.
Are there a lot of buildings left?
No, all the buildings are gone. Foundations still exist if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And the cemeteries are all cared for. The cemeteries have all been fenced off and they're cared for.
Right.
And we now have a listing of everybody that's buried at the cemeteries.
That'd be cool to see.
If you're interested in visiting in the fall, we don't have a date yet, but in the fall, there's going to be a bus tour of the cemeteries and the lost villages. Keep an eye on the news, visit the museum, give me a call, whatever the case may be. That's being organized by Cultural Resources, our archaeologist, and the Public Affairs Office. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. The great thing is going to be in the fall, after the bugs are dead, but before the snow, but also when the colors are all changed.
Just a comment, our next lecture will be on the lost villages.
Dr. Rush?
Jim Brownbell.
Okay.
Yep, he'll be presenting in June, so just FYI.
Highly recommend you attend that, but much more of an expert than I am. Now we get into my area of expertise. The reason we needed all that land was the next technology leap, tanks. Remember I said they marched from Sackett's Harbor to Pine Camp? How did you all get here today? Think about it. Yeah, think about it. You didn't take a horse and you didn't walk. You covered a whole lot more ground in your vehicle. All of a sudden, when you start mechanizing the battlefield grows exponentially. Okay. We trained the 4th Armored Division, came here from Fort Knox, Kentucky, to grow, become the division they were, and then go to Germany to fight. The 5th Armored Division was born here from scratch, and then the 45th Infantry Division came here for winter training. A couple of unique individuals came through Pine Camp during this time. Oh, we also trained individual tank destroyer battalions and individual tank battalions as well. Lots of soldiers trained at Pine Camp during the war. 4th Armored Division should ring a bell. This is Patton's Spearhead. These are the first and the best stone. The young tank commander by the name of Abrams. That ring a bell? They named the Abrams tank after him. Was a young tank commander of the 4th Armored Division here at Pine Camp. 45th Infantry Division had a cartoonist working for them by the name of Bill Malden, who Willie and Joe aren't born at Pine Camp, but his cartooning becomes much more serious, much more darker, much more observational, much more professional while he's here at Pine Camp. So some unique individuals passed through Pine Camp during World War II. And then one really interesting group. That's not a tank. That's not a tank destroyer. It's actually a piece of pipe to make it look like a tank destroyer. But what's sticking out of the top is classified at the time. It is a loudspeaker. This is the 3132nd and 31 Special Signal Companies trained here during the war. They went out on the battlefield and made noise. The noise of tanks operating, the noise of bridges being built, soldiers bivouacking, things like that. They go to Europe and in England join the 23rd Special Troops Battalion, 23rd Special Headquarters Troops Battalion. They go out on the battlefield and they blow up tanks. When I mean blow up tanks, I mean they inflated tanks.
Yeah,
This is the Ghost Army.
They were the showmen.
Yeah, exactly. They went out when they put on, it's exactly what they said. They went on, they put on a show.
Yeah.
The one show that they put on, the big show that they put on, is they came, well, first of all, these guys, I found a newspaper article of 1944 about tanks operating near Antwerp and the locals complaining about him keeping him up at night. The problem was, there was no tanks here in 1944. It was these guys off in the woods making noise.
Practicing.
Yeah, exactly. But they the big show that they put on was at the Rhine River. When Patton's going to cross the Rhine River, they come up. This is a battalion of soldiers, a few hundred soldiers pretending to be a few thousand soldiers. Okay? They come up, they put on their show. They inflate the tanks, they set up camouflage positions, they run bulldozers through the woods to make it look like tank tracks. They play their sounds, they do the radio deceptions, and they everything that they did. And they convinced the Germans the crossing was going to be where they were. And they drew all of their reinforcements from the surrounding area to oppose them. Now, when Patton crossed the river, upriver, there was nobody there. So, this guy is commonly referred to as the Ghost Army. That's who you want to look for, the Ghost Army. Don't be confused with the deception operations for D-Day. That's not these guys. The deception operations for D-Day were strategic. We didn't inflate tanks by the million to convince the Germans we were coming to Pas-de-Calais. That was a different operation. These guys went out within distance of being shot and put on their play, and almost got overran a couple times, and completely wiped out. They were on the front lines, making noise and putting on a production. So, anybody know who that guy is? Hugh A. Drum. Okay, that's who we're named after. In 1951, during World War II, he was next in line to be Chief of Staff of the Army. He was passed over for promotion because he was Chief of Staff to Pershing during World War I. Little long in the tooth, not quite up on more modern combat. So he wasn't quite put out the pasture, but he decided, if you're not going to make me Chief of Staff, I'm going to retire. So he retired, took over the New York State Militia during the war, which is still around today. Then after the war, helped found the Empire Economic Zone, helped build the Empire State Building, and in 1950, when he passed away at his desk in the Empire State Building, there was a movement to name something after him. Well, we were named after the Pine Plains region, which is kind of lame when you think about it. We're not named after anybody. And when Hugh was commander of First Army, he visited Pine Camp because it was under his command. So there is a local connection to Fort Drum and Hugh Drum. So in 1951, we became Camp Drum initially. Then in 1974, we became Fort Drum. What's the difference between a camp and a fort? Camp traditionally is temporary. Traditionally, a fort is permanent. So immediately in 1974, when we became Fort Drum, they started talking about closing us down. I said traditionally. So, but that's how we're named after with our namesake. This is why Fort Drum, Camp Drum existed during the Cold War. Back to tanks. From World War II up until 1985, really up until the 1990s, or late 90s, Pine Camp, Camp Drum, Fort Drum is all about tanks. Tankers came here to fight in Germany during World War II. Then they came here to fight in Germany during the Cold War, and fight World War III. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Vermont, everybody from the Northeast came to Pine Camp, Camp Drum to train for World War III. There was nowhere, even the Canadians used to come down to train at Fort Drum. There's nowhere else to train. An entire division of soldiers came out of New York City. There's a lot of manpower in the city alone. But where are you going to train on a tank in the city? So that's why they came here to Fort Drum to train. So now we're going to take a leap away from tanks and Fort Drum, and we're going to talk about 10th Mountain Division. So 10th Mountain Division traces our lineage back to the National Ski Patrol, believe it or not. Guy by the name on the left, by a guy by the name of Meany Dole, was the founder of the National Ski Patrol and an avid outdoorsman. And he was watching the news as Finland was invaded by Russia. And it looked a lot like what's happening in Ukraine. The Russians invaded, completely outnumbered the Finns. The Finns didn't have tanks. They didn't have anti-tank guns, hardly had an air force. They were a small army. The Russians attacked with modern equipment, modern tanks, modern airplanes, on, and the Finns handed them their ass. They did things like wait till the tanks rolled by because they couldn't take them out, attack their supply column behind them, snowshoe through the woods, come to a frozen lake, and ice skate across the lake. The Russians were completely ill-prepared for this, had no way of fighting a winter war. So Minnie Dole watches this and says, what happened if Canada were to fall, or England were to fall and Canada becomes a puppet, kind of like Vichy France? The traditional invasion route is down the Hudson, through the Northeast, through the mountains, through the cold. Maybe not going to happen. What happens if the Japanese invade Alaska? That did happen. Okay, so he petitions the United States Army saying we need a winter warfare mountain capability in the Army. Prior to this, the Army didn't fight in the wintertime. If you watch World War I movies, they're always fighting in the wet and cold and the wet, but never in the snow. You took the war off when it was. If you fought a battle in the winter, you learned about it in school. Think about it. What happened at Trenton with George Washington? Okay, that's how much the Army did not fight in the winter. So Minnie Dole convinces the Army, all right, we need a winter warfare capability. He also convinces the Army, I have the perfect organization to help you recruit the soldiers for this new capability. He says it'll be much easier to train a skier to be a soldier than a soldier to be a skier. So the National Ski Patrol helps recruit the 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment. And they're stationed at Camp Lewis, Washington, on the slopes of Mount Rainier. And these guys are some of the most highly trained, best educated unit in the history of the United States Army, because they were all recruited from Dartmouth and Ivy League schools, because at this time, skiing was not what it is today. Skiing was a rich man's sport and really was just starting to take off in this country. You really had to be well-to-do to be a skier. The ski trains going into the Adirondacks exist, but not like they do until after World War II. So these guys mostly all have college educations throughout all the ranks. So they do things like they ski for the Army all week long. They go on pass on the weekend. They climb higher into the mountain, go ski jumping. So, okay, that's how avid a skier these guys really are. And then, like I said, Alaska was invaded during the war. The islands of Attu and Attu and Kiska were invaded by the Japanese. The first time U.S. soil had been invaded since the War of 1812. The Battle of Attu was a bloody disaster. We took almost as many casualties to the cold that we did to the Japanese. Completely ill-prepared. So when it came time for Kiska, the decision was made, we're going to add the 87th to Task Force 9 to go in to help take Kiska Island. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it, by the time when we got there, the Japanese had managed to retreat. So they landed on an empty island. But they were prepared. We had that unit. At the same time, the 85th, 86th, and 90th were formed at Camp Hale, Washington, or Camp Hale, Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains. 90th Regiment was cut loose. 87th joined them. So 85th, 86th, 87th regiments are all formed together to form the 10th Light Division Alpine. Heck of a name. We don't even know what to call these guys, much less do with them. literally start to write the book on mountain operations. I mean, I have a book in the museum. It's called Mountain Operations. We don't know. And not only that, but you ever notice the Army has a book for everything? You know why? Have you ever cooked for 1,000 people? You ever spark plugs on a Jeep? Have you ever set up camp, packed a mule? You know, things like that. And you don't know until you know. So that's why there's a book for everything in the Army. The problem is we had to write the book first. 10th Mountain Division literally is writing the books as they go.
Yeah.
So 10th Mountain Division, or excuse me, the 10th Light Division moves to Camp Swift, Texas, where they just, this is where it gets really convoluted. They're sent to Texas because we decided we don't want a mountain division. We don't need a mountain division. Patton doesn't need a mountain division. There's no mountain need for guys running mules in the mountains when there's tank battles happening across Europe. So we're going to get rid of the 10th Light Division. We're going to convert them to regular infantry, and they're going to join Patton in Europe. And then General Clark in Italy says, I could use a mountain division. So they said, okay, here's your mountain tab in Camp Swift, Texas, in the flatlands and hot. And then they shipped them off to Italy, where they were in the mountains, where they belonged. Mount Belvedere, where you see the red and green line, that's Mount Belvedere. The Germans had drawn one last desperate line across Italy, the Gothic line. They had everything they had behind this line. That line fails, the next stop is the Alps and southern Germany. So the linchpin to the Gothic line is Mount Belvedere. There's really, when you look at the map, there's no way around it. That's the high ground. The highway runs up along there. If you control the high ground, you can drop artillery on the highway. You have to take Belvedere. Twice the Allies had attacked it. Twice they've been repelled. One time they actually made it to the top and then got pushed off. 10th Mountain Division arrives and says, no. Belvedere might be the linchpin to the Gustav line, but Riva Ridge, you see the arrows in blue, that's the linchpin to Belvedere. So 3 regiments to the division, 1 regiment, the 86th, goes up Riva Ridge, 87th and 85th go up Belvedere. The 86th does it at night. That's after everybody else had looked at it and said, we know that's the linchpin. That's where all the German observers are. They're watching us prepare to get ready to launch the attack, and they're dropping artillery on us every day. We know what time the general gets out of his tent in the morning because they've got the high ground. But nobody bothered to attack it because it was impossible to take. It was impossible to climb. 10th Mountain Division seized it at night. The next night, held Belvedere. Some of the bloodiest fighting the division saw during the war. Took Belvedere, and then as you can see, it's just one damn mountaintop after another, as one soldier put it. Said no more tanks. But you notice we weren't running the tanks, we were running the mules behind them. After Belvedere, we break out. And I mean break out. We're running stolen German Jeeps, bicycles, cars, horses, mules, whatever you can, trying to chase the Germans before they can make it to their next defensive point, being the Alps in southern Germany. We're chasing them to the end of the war, essentially. At the end of the war, German commanders request that he only surrender to the commander of the 10th Mountain Division. That's how much respect they had for him. So we find our place at a place called Lake Garda and Mussolini's palace. I don't have a picture of it. I have a picture in the museum of us wearing the contents of his closet. These items are on display. This is from Mussolini's uniform. And it was written up on a letterhead to give it some legitimacy. Showed up folded in thirds in an envelope to me one day in the mail. Opened the mail, read it the second time, sat it down, put on my gloves. Bought a safe. Realized what I was holding. But yeah, we have bits and pieces of Mussolini's uniform on display. So at the end of the war, 10th Mountain Division is going to go to Japan to fight against the Japanese in the Pacific. Have you seen Band of Brothers?
Yeah.
And all about the point system as to who gets to go home first and all that. They weren't supposed to go home. They were going to pack up, ship out, go fight the war in Japan. They weren't real happy about that, but that's what was going to happen. 10th Mountain Division was the fresh. We'd only been in battle for 10 months. Some of these other guys have been in battle for years. Okay, North Africa. 1st Infantry Division has been in battle since North Africa, and then across France, across Germany. You see, some units saw combat in North Africa, Sicily, and then France, across Germany. 10th Mountain Division was in the battle for 10 months. And then they're like, you're kind of fresh. We're going to send you home first, retrain you, ship you to Japan. On the way home, we decide to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 10th Mountain Division gets to come home first. While all the other guys are in the process of figuring out their points, 10th Mountain Division guys are already home. So kind of lucked out a little bit on that one. But after the war, what do? Okay. 82nd Airborne, 101st Airborne didn't go off and jump out of airplanes. The Air Force guys didn't come home to fly airplanes, I can guarantee that, because North American built airplanes thinking there was going to be a huge rush of pilots to go fly airplanes in the civilian world. Didn't happen. Some did, but not like they were expecting. Navy guys didn't come back to the Great Lakes to go sailing. 10th Mountain Division guys went skiing. Okay, these guys were skiers from the get-go. But now all of a sudden, they're trained, they're organized, they know how to run an operation. They go to places like Vail, which is a logging camp, and set up Vail Ski Resort, Breckenridge. They come back to Lake Placid and revitalize Lake Placid. If you go up to the top of Whiteface Mountain, there's a 10th Mountain Division plaque there dedicated to the guys who helped renovate the runs and things like that. Yeah, the Olympics were held there prior to the war, but the reason that they exist today was because of the World War II guys that came back. Not only that, but think about the clothes you're wearing today. Think about winter sports that we have today. How many times have you been told dress in layers? We didn't do that until the 10th Mountain Division figured it out. They're the ones that introduced us to winter sports, technology for winter wear. It wasn't until very recently that we got away from a lot of the technology in what you wear. It only recently took another giant leap with Gore-Tex and nylon and things like that. A lot of what we wore was the stuff that they prototyped. But yeah, the whole idea of going outside in the winter, directly 10th Mountain Division came back and introduced us to that. So, no 10th Mountain Division in the Army after World War II. However, the 10th Infantry comes back into being. They are a boot camp cadre at Fort Riley during the Cold War. They keep alive the traditions of the 10th Mountain Division, kind of keep alive their history. They organize the soldiers going through boot camp into the units that were the 85th, 86th, 87th. You know, they marched around camp for their 8 weeks, you know, kind of keeping the history alive. But they're not a combat division. Not until they become one. 10th Infantry Division is brought back down to 0 strength. Another combat division is brought in, reflagged as the 10th Infantry Division, who ironically has tanks, and goes to Germany as part of Operation Gyroscope. Today, we're prior to 1991 Gulf War, we went to Germany as individuals. That's how I got there as a kid. My dad was an individual soldier, took his family to Germany, then we came back. So the 1st Infantry Division was in Germany, basically from the end of World War II onward to the Cold War. Individual soldiers came and went, the unit stayed there. Army decided to experiment. After the war, we said, why don't we, instead of individual replacements, take the whole unit, not their stuff, but the unit. So they took the entire 10th Infantry Division and their families, put them on a boat, or boats, floated them across the Atlantic, and stood the center line of the Fulda Gap. If you're familiar with the Fulda Gap, that's where World War III was going to be fought. I lived on the Fulda Gap as a kid with my dad who was going to fight the war. It's kind of a different world. And so 10th Infantry Division went, did their 3 years, and then came back in mass, and then were disbanded again. So no more 10th Infantry again. No more 10th Mountain since World War II. Now there's no more 10th Infantry even. Not until 1985 is the 10th Mountain Division reactivated as a light infantry division. We're not a mountain division like you think. We're not a mountain division like we were during World War II. There's no mountains here, if you might have noticed. But remember, soldiers used to come here during World War II to train to fight in Germany. It's an excellent place to train to go fight in Germany. And that's what the 10th Mountain Division was going to do during the Cold War. They were a new concept, light division. Light enough to get to the fight. We don't have tanks and heavy artillery and things like that. We're light enough to maneuver to get to the battlefield, and then light to maneuver on the battlefield. The Army calls it tooth to tail. There's not as much of a supply chain to keep the 10th Infantry in the fight. We wear the mountain tab to honor the World War II soldiers. Mm-hmm. So, from 1985, anybody remember Bob Dole? Mm-hmm. That's him in the suit there. He was a 10th Mountain Division soldier during World War II. Remember, he used to carry his arm.
Yeah,
that was
injured.
Yeah, he was injured during the post Belvedere, and that's where he received shrapnel. And depending on who you talk to, he was a lieutenant. He was like some guys that served with him said, he probably would have gone on to do good things if he hadn't been injured and sent home. His memoir is quite interesting. He didn't spend a lot of time with the division, but that's who he was injured with, and that's who he considered he was a veteran of, was the 10th. So from 1985 to 1991, I wish I had a picture of the Gulf War map, that famous right book, and it shows all the divisions. And guess who's not there? 10th Infantry Division, 10th Mountain Division. We didn't go to the Gulf War. It was a tank war. We don't have tanks. And everybody said, we don't need a mountain division on the modern day battlefield. There's no need for a light infantry division on the modern day battlefield. It's all going to be tanks. So in 1992, when Hurricane Andrew came through, destroyed Homestead, Florida. It looks like God took a broom to the city. Mm-hmm. You saw tornado damage on a hurricane scale. 10th Mountain Division, our graduation deployment was to send the headquarters and a brigade down there to help clean up, essentially. And it was our first peacekeeping operation. It just happened to be in the United States. We weren't shooting at anybody or anything like that, but it was essentially a peacekeeping operation as we went down and rebuilt Homestead, Florida. And all the tankers went, well, that's good because we're too busy. We've been busy in, getting ready coming home from the Gulf War. And that's good. Light infantry can go do that. Then came a place called Somalia. And the tankers all went, well, that's urban combat. We don't want to take tanks into urban combat. So light infantry went with the Marines. Now, the coveted Rock of Somalia Award, presented to the windshield of Specialist Hank Othmar during an informal ceremony on Route 7, north of Mogadishu, 14 July, 1993. Do you get it? Somebody threw a rock at him. He kept it. Typed that up and stuck it to the rock. It's on display in the museum right now. It is my favorite artifact. 10th Mountain Division was sent into Somalia. Somalia was a failed nation state. There was no government in Somalia at the time. It was just factions fighting against one another. Food aid was making its way to the port. piling up and not getting pushed inland because there was no infrastructure and there was no government to distribute it. 10th Mountain Division went in on a peacekeeping operation, did just like my mother used to do. Me and my brother went in, knocked a few heads and said, knock it off. Started to push food aid inland. Things were going fairly well. We were also there with the Marines, they get credit too. And then a guy by the name of Adid convinces the local population that the people feeding you are the bad guys. And so you start seeing riots like the one north of Mogadishu on 14 July 93. You start to see the local population turn against the soldiers and Marines. Bill Clinton is the president, and George W.H. Bush is the one that sends us in. Bill Clinton's the president when Delta Force and Army Rangers go in to capture the warlord in charge by the name of Adid. On a mission to capture some of his lieutenants that are holding up in the Olympia Hotel, they land on the roof of the building. Delta Force goes through the building, captures everybody, takes them out front. Army Rangers fast roped onto each corner of the building, set up a perimeter, got everybody out front, and then everybody, the brother showed up with a gun, surrounded them, and then they shot down a helicopter, and then they shot down a second helicopter. Does this sound familiar? This is the Battle of Mogadishu. This is Black Hawk Down. 10th Mountain Division is the Quick Reaction Force at the time. Quick Reaction Force is exactly what it sounds like. They get the call to go in to help rescue Task Force Ranger. It does not go well. We are not the cavalry who rides in to save the day. They have to fight their way in, riding in Malaysian armored cars, escorted by Pakistani tanks, air cover by the 10th Cab or 10th Aviation Regiment at the time, fight their way in to help rescue Task Force Ranger and then fight their way out. If you've seen the movie Black Hawk Down, that's 10th Mountain Division at the end of the movie that comes to their rescue. They're the ones that ultimately help rescue Task Force Ranger. But like I said, it's not leading the charge to save the day. It was a hard fought slug to get in and get them out. Come home from Somalia, and we go to Haiti. It looks like you're going to fly tanks off an aircraft carrier. Okay. Haiti, again, is an urban combat type mission. Leader of Haiti decides, we're going to hold free and fair elections. First time ever. Then decides, I lost. Forget it. The United Nations steps in and says, no, that's not how this is going to work. You have a choice. You can leave, or we're going to send in the United States military. Again, 10th Mountain Division is going to be the spearhead, light infantry to the rescue. Light infantry flies off the aircraft carrier. No tanks are going to fly off an aircraft carrier. Then, after we seize the port and the airfield, we start flying directly in from Fort Drum soldiers into Haiti. Tanks don't fly very well. Okay, so again, light infantry. Then comes, we go into Haiti. Not the greatest camping trip in the world. It wasn't active combat, but it wasn't exactly a camping trip either. It wasn't very polite, let's say. It was a peacekeeping operation in Haiti. Then comes Bosnia. Peacekeeping operations in Bosnia. Tankers are like, well, we don't need tanks in a peacekeeping operation. So light infantry gets rotated through again. We do multiple deployments to Bosnia, Kosovo, the Sinai Peninsula. It gets so bad in the Sinai Peninsula, the only ones allowed to go through are light infantry and the airborne. Tankers are no longer allowed to operate there. So this during this time in the 80s and 90s, 10th Mountain Division becomes the most deployed division in the United States Army because we're constantly rotating through on these peacekeeping operations. Then 9/11 occurs. 10th Mountain Division is the first conventional forces into Afghanistan, and we do so directly supporting the special forces. If you've seen the movie 12 Strong, where they're riding horses and things like that through the mountains, That's the special forces. That's the Green Berets that were in there operating. We came in as a much larger force, but now where we belong in our namesake, we're operating in the mountains. Happens to be that light infantry does pretty damn well in the mountains, and tanks don't. I think during the whole course of the war, I think the Marines sent in 4 tanks. The whole war, and they failed. So light infantry division saves the day. We take part in Operation Anaconda. This is the first major operation during the war. We were driving south, trying to capture as many people as we could, in particular Bin Laden, before they made it into Pakistan. Obviously, we didn't get Bin Laden, but we did keep a lot from getting into Pakistan. And it was the first major operation. You can see who all took place, who took part in the operation. But, and then all the following operations are listed on there as well. But 20 years fighting in the mountains. In Iraq, 2004 to 2009. 10th Mountain Division, we didn't take part in the initial push from the south, but an interesting side note. There was a push to move the 4th Infantry Division through Turkey and attack from the north towards Baghdad. 4th Infantry Division was on the boat, on the way, when the Turks said no. Even though they had said yes, we had made the plan, they said no, shipped everybody to southern Iraq, through Kuwait, attacked from the south instead. Still wanted to open a second front. So they threw in special forces and they worked with the Kurds in northern Iraq, not in the second front. So we threw in the 173rd Airborne Brigade out of Vicenza, Italy, at the time, which was 2 battalions of airborne with no support elements. 2 battalions, not a second front. So they activated the Quick Reaction Force out of Germany. 1st Infantry Division, they started flying tanks in one at a time. Yeah, didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
And then they found out what all they brought with them. That tooth to tail.
Yeah.
They weren't used to operating out of an airplane, and all of a sudden realized we forgot all of our chemical gear. We have no medics. We don't have all this stuff. So 10th Mountain Division gets tasked to go in and support this ragtag Battlestar Galactica that's going to fight its way south towards Baghdad. Elements from the 10th Mountain Division go in, form up with this element of, like I said, it looks like Battlestar Galactica, a couple tanks, and some armies, and locals, and they start fighting their way down south or towards Baghdad. Saddam gets so scared, he moves an entire division of Medellin, his best fighters, north of Baghdad to protect Baghdad from this operation. So, again, light infantry on the battlefield. And then 10th Mountain Division was at the very beginnings, not the first, but at the beginnings of Operation Enduring Freedom, and we were there at the very end. 82nd Airborne came in, took all the credit. They were the last ones out. But the reason they were able to land on the airfield is because 4th Brigade, 10th Mountain Division was holding the airfield for them. But then they took all the credit and they flew out last. Operation Inherent Resolve, up until very recently, I mean, like very, very recently, was taking place in Kuwait, Western Iraq, and Syria, trying to fight ISIS, keep them at bay in that region. We kind of home based in Kuwait, operated in Turkey into Syria. We're building an exhibit on this right now as we speak. Couple months we should have it up and running. We're just now starting to do the research. And then back to mules. 10th Mountain Division was the first division headquarters element to operate on the southern border. I think it's Operation Southern Border. I can't, but anyway, task force is operating on the southern border. 10th Mountain Division initially operated down there, came home, and then 10th Combat Aviation Brigade supported it as well. So today, you ever heard the term power projection? It's a big Army term meaning we can get there. 10th Mountain Division has an airfield that we can land anything on and get on a plane and get the people there And we have a railhead. We have 2 railheads now where we can load up all of our equipment and get the equipment to the port, get it on the ship to get it to where it needs to go. More importantly, 10th Infantry is so light, capable, we don't need the railhead if we have to. If need be, we can take it, the plane, and get there and fight. So, if you would like to learn more, the museum is located on Colonel Reed Road. It's near the airfield, if you're familiar. We're just on the other side of that big bridge that goes over 26. We're located there next to natural resources. Open Tuesday through Friday now, 10 to 4, closed the first Tuesday of the month. So is there any questions? Yes.
How many military representatives are on Fort Drum now?
I knew I was going to get that, so I looked it up. Don't know. Because it's constantly flexing.
Yes.
It's between 15 and 20,000 soldiers,
Okay,
but it's goofy because we've got 2 brigades of 10th Mountain Division with a 3rd brigade at Fort Polk. We've got the Sustainment Brigade up here, Combat Aviation Brigade up here. We just gave up a bunch of helicopters from the Combat Aviation Brigade. We're in the middle of reorganizing what a light infantry division looks like. So we're losing some units and gaining others. And then we just started gaining elements of a multi-domain task force that has nothing to do with Fort Drum. Or, excuse me, everything to do with Fort Drum, but nothing to do with 10th Mountain Division. So it's constantly flexing, but it's around 20,000 soldiers.
thank you.
Do they do any winter warfare training still?
All the time. Everyone.
I say it's a really good place, honestly. with
Yes,
how
that's
cold it was here.
one of the reasons the 10th
Yes.
Mountain Division has stayed is because of the weather.
Yeah.
We are in a unique location. There's only really 2 places to train in the Army for the cold. The dry cold of Alaska and the wet cold of Fort Drum, and in all reality. And Army just, within the last 10 years, really, well, since the end of the global war on terror, really recognized that fact and started to invest in that again. And so we take, well, I know, soldiers take winter training very seriously. I have more questions than that. I didn't cover everything. I didn't talk about prisoner of war camp. I didn't talk about, yeah, visit
I
the
know
museum
about
more
that.
about that.
Yeah, I know about that. Did you know about the one, they had a refugee camp in Oswego too?
That was refugee camp. not
Yeah,
prisoner of war.
refugee
Yeah,
camp.
different
that's it,
story.
yeah.
Have you run across the early 1940s and the late 40s testing of radar up here in the North Country?
Not testing of radar, not in the 30s and 40s, but radar plays a really important story during the Cold War.
But before radar was being invented or created,
No, I haven't.
you haven't, because there was a huge, I believe there was a huge war game played up here where radar participated, was part of it.
Oh, I have to look into that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time looking into it and got very frustrated.
Okay. No,
No.
not in the 30s and 40s. Now, not radar during the 30s and 40s, but during the Cold War, the Pine Line, the first line across the United States to look for Russian bombers. If you go out near the old prison, there's a radar site there. And that was the first line of defense. And then we had a radar on Fort Drum where B-52s used to fly across and bomb the airfield. But they did it all by radar bombing. And the way they were judged was a radar unit that was set up on South Post. And they would track the bombers, and the bombers would say bombs away, and they'd track them on the radar and determine if they actually hit the airfield or not. So yeah, radar's played an important story up here, but I'm not aware of one in the 30s and 40s.
So what about the prisoner of war camp?
Okay, prisoner of war camp. During the North Africa campaign, we started to take prisoners of war. We needed somewhere to send them because North Africa just didn't have the infrastructure to keep them. So we started sending them back to the United States. England wasn't a real good place because they couldn't feed themselves, much less somebody else. So we start shipping them back to the United States. And they get spread all over the Northeast, all over New York in particular. They get sent to Pine Camp because we had a hospital. And so we became the hub of a hub and spoke system for carrying or for distributing POWs throughout New York. Fort Niagara had a big collection of them. Oswego had some. All over the place. I mean, it's all over the place. And they did things like chop firewood, pick apples, work in the fields. They got paid for what they did, according to the Geneva Convention. Talking to family members, they were rather well taken care of, didn't want to come home. After the war, we're sending home care packages that kept families alive. They were shipping home Spam, and was the only meat that some of these families were getting in the mail. They you know, I mean, as Germany rebuilt and these guys were still prisoners of war, even though the war was over, they're shipping home care packages. And I have some things that they built while they were in captivity. If you're building a chair out of a barrel, you got enough tools to escape. But where are you going to escape to? Where do you think about it? But they were all over, as the war continued, they were all over the United States. Out west, Albuquerque, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas, into Arizona. I mean, they were everywhere. And they were not held in the building where the museum was. That's a common misconception. They were held in the POW camp, and I can show you on the map. Yeah. Yes.
The base, prior to the base, there was a WPA, I think they called it, out towards the ammo dump on the right camp.
CCC camp was the Civilian Concentration Corps, and the WPA I'm not as familiar with.
I was thinking that those two loops are WPA, not CCC.
I know about the CCC camp. WPA I'm not as familiar with. Yeah, because
I think we're talking about the same location.
yeah, the CCC camp actually, prior to Pine Camp being built, the first winter maneuvers in the United States Army were held in this area, and they held them, and they didn't know where to hold them per se, so they held them in the CCC. They housed them in the CCC camp.
They were still building.
Yeah.
I think that out in that area, there was like some foundation thing, which I think maybe was a small water tower
Could have been. It makes sense.
right out there.
It make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
All right.
All right.
I expect you to come out and visit the museum now.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to do this.